The dinner rush at the Golden Fork was in full swing that Friday evening. The clinking of silverware mixed with soft jazz music and the hum of conversation from well-dressed diners. Among the servers weaving between tables, Elena Reyes moved, with practiced grace, balancing a tray of expensive wines while keeping a pleasant smile on her tired face. She had been working at this upscale restaurant for 3 years now. 3 long years of double shifts, sore feet, and dealing with demanding customers. But she never complained. Every dollar she earned went toward her mother's medical bills. Her mother, once a vibrant woman who loved to dance, was now confined to a wheelchair after a terrible accident that had changed their lives forever. Elena glanced at the clock. 7:30. Just 4 more hours until she could go home, check on her mother, and maybe, if she wasn't too exhausted, practice for a few minutes on the old keyboard in her tiny apartment. Music had once been her whole world, but now it was a luxury she could barely afford time for. The restaurant door chimed and the atmosphere suddenly shifted. Conversations quieted and heads turned. Elena looked up to see him walking in. Everyone knew who he was. Victor Ashford, the tech billionaire whose face appeared on magazine covers and business news channels. At 35, he had built an empire, worth billions, and he carried himself like he owned not just his companies, but the very air everyone breathed. He wasn't alone. A group of executives followed him, all wearing suits that probably cost more than Elena made in 6 months. The restaurant manager, Mr. Davidson, practically ran to greet them, his face flushed with excitement. "Mr. Ashford, what an honor. Your usual table is ready." Victor barely acknowledged him with a nod. His eyes swept across the restaurant like a king surveying his kingdom. The group was seated at the best table, naturally, with a perfect view of the city lights through the floor to ceiling. Windows Elena's section, of course. She took a deep breath, grabbed her notepad, and approached the table. She had served celebrities and wealthy people before. The key was to be invisible, efficient, polite, but invisible. "Good evening. I'm Elena, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with some drinks?" Victor didn't even look at her. He was scrolling through his phone while talking to one of his executives about some merger. The others ordered various cocktails and wines. Elena wrote everything down carefully, repeated the order to confirm, and turned to leave. That's when it happened. The restaurant's layout had always been a bit cramped, with tables placed close together to maximize capacity. As Elena pivoted to head toward the bar, her hip accidentally bumped Victor's chair. It was barely a touch, just enough to jostle him slightly, but his reaction was immediate. "Seriously?" His voice cut through the air like a blade. Elena froze. "I'm so sorry, sir. Please excuse me." For the first time, Victor really looked at her. His eyes were cold, calculating, the kind of look that made people feel small. But then something caught his attention. As Elena had reached out to steady herself, her sleeve had pulled back slightly, revealing a small tattoo on her wrist. A delicate musical note, a treble clef intertwined with a rose. A smirk spread across Victor's face. Not a smile, but a smirk, the kind that meant someone was about to become entertainment. "Well, well," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Our clumsy waitress appears to be a music lover." He leaned back in his chair, that smirk growing wider. "Tell me, do you play? Or is that tattoo just for show, like those people who get Chinese characters without knowing what they mean?" Elena's cheeks burned. I used to play a little." "Used to?" Victor laughed, and his companions joined in. "What happened? Realized you weren't good enough to make it?" The words stung more than he could possibly know. Elena wanted to walk away, to just get their drinks and pretend this wasn't happening, but Victor wasn't done. "You know what?" He pulled out his wallet and slapped 10 $100 bills on the table. "There's a piano right there in the corner. It's been sitting there gathering dust for who knows how long. Play something. For us. Anything. If you can actually play more than Mary Had a Little Lamb, this $1,000 is yours." The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were watching now, some with sympathy, others with the kind of morbid curiosity that made people slow down at accident scenes. "Sir, I'm working. I need to get your drinks," Elena said quietly. "Nonsense." Victor waved his hand dismissively. "I'm sure your manager won't mind. "Will you, Davidson?" Mr. Davidson, who had been hovering nearby, looked uncomfortable but managed a weak smile. "Of course not, Mr. Ashford, whatever you'd like." Elena looked at her manager, hoping he would give her an out, but he just nodded toward the piano. She understood. Victor Ashford was too important a customer to disappoint. "Go on," Victor said, his phone now out, and pointed at her. "Let's see what our musical waitress can do. Consider it part of your service for the evening, who knows. If you're decent, maybe I'll even hire you to play at one of my corporate events, though I doubt someone waiting tables has kept up with their practice." His friends laughed again. One of them, a woman in a designer dress, added, "This should be amusing." Elena stood there for a moment, feeling every eye in the restaurant on her. She could feel her hands trembling slightly, not from nerves about playing, but from anger and humiliation. This man, with all his money and power, had decided to make her his entertainment for the evening. He had no idea who she was or what she had been through. To him, she was just a waitress, someone beneath him, someone to mock. She thought about her mother waiting at home. Her mother who had sold her own piano to help pay for Elena's education years ago. Her mother who still believed Elena would return to music someday. Her mother who didn't know that Elena had given up everything to take care of her. "Well?" Victor's voice was impatient now. "We don't have all night. Or are you going to admit that tattoo is just for decoration?" Elena set down her notepad and pen on a nearby table. She walked toward the piano, each step measured and calm despite the storm inside her. The piano was a beautiful instrument, a Steinway Grand that the restaurant owner had bought years ago for ambiance. It was kept in tune, she knew, because she had heard the technician who came monthly, but no one ever played it. As she approached the bench, she heard Victor say to his group, $10 says she plays chopsticks and runs away crying." Elena sat down at the bench and adjusted it carefully. The action was so familiar, so automatic, that for a moment she forgot where she was. Her fingers rested on the keys, and she could feel their cool, smooth surface. How long had it been since she'd played a real piano? Not the electronic keyboard with half the keys missing that she practiced on at home, but a real piano? She looked down at the keys, and in that moment, something inside her shifted. This man wanted a show. He wanted to humiliate her. He thought she was just some nobody who got a music tattoo to seem interesting. Elena took a breath and made a decision. She wouldn't play some simple piece. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of being right about her. No, she would play something that would shut that smirk off his face, something that would make him realize that not everything in this world could be bought, mocked, or dismissed. Her fingers positioned themselves, and the restaurant held its breath, waiting to see what the waitress with the music note tattoo would do next. Elena's fingers hovered above the keys for just a moment. The restaurant was so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning. Everyone was watching, waiting. Some diners had even put down their forks, their expensive meals forgotten. Then she began to play. The first notes that filled the air weren't from some simple children's song or basic melody. No, Elena's fingers found their way into the opening of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, one of the most challenging pieces ever written for piano. The deep, haunting notes rolled through the restaurant like distant thunder. Victor's smirk faltered slightly. This wasn't what he expected. Elena's hands moved across the keyboard with a grace that seemed impossible. Her fingers danced, flew, commanded the keys with the kind of precision that takes not years but decades to master. The melody built, layer upon layer, complex harmonies weaving together into something that made the air itself seem to shimmer. A woman at a nearby table gasped softly. She had been to enough concerts to recognize not just the piece but the level of skill required to play it. This wasn't some amateur who had taken a few lessons. This was something else entirely. Elena closed her eyes as she played, and for the first time in 3 years, she let herself truly feel the music. Each note brought back memories. Her father listening to her practice, his face glowing with pride. Her mother dancing in their living room, spinning and laughing. The stages she had once commanded, the audiences who had risen to their feet, the dreams she had once held so close. The music swelled, filling every corner of the restaurant. Conversations at tables throughout the dining room had completely stopped. A businessman lowered his phone mid-call. A couple celebrating their anniversary held hands, mesmerized. Even the kitchen staff had emerged from behind the swinging doors drawn by the sound. Victor Ashford sat frozen in his chair. The phone he had been holding to record Elena's humiliation lay forgotten on the table. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide. This wasn't possible. This waitress, this nobody he had been mocking moments ago, was creating something magnificent. Elena's fingers flew across the most difficult passages of the piece, sections that many professional pianists struggled with. But she didn't struggle. She soared. The music poured from her soul. 3 years of suppressed passion and pain transformed into sound. Every note was perfect, but more than that, every note was alive with emotion. Mr. Davidson, the restaurant manager, stood near the kitchen entrance, his hand over his mouth. There was something familiar about this playing, something that tugged at his memory. He had heard this before, but where? The style, the interpretation. It was so distinctive, so unique. As Elena moved into the piece's emotional center, tears began to roll down her cheeks, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The music had taken over, and she was merely its vessel. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, completely lost in the world she was creating with sound. An elderly man at a corner table suddenly stood up, his face pale with recognition. He was a retired music professor from Juilliard, and he knew exactly what he was witnessing. He had seen this before years ago at a competition that had left the classical music world stunned. "My God," he whispered to his wife. "That's her. That's Elena Volkov." The name rippled through the restaurant, like a stone dropped in still water. Elena Volkov. Several people pulled out their phones, not to record but to search. And there it was. Article after article from 5 years ago. Youngest winner of International Tchaikovsky Competition. Piano prodigy stuns classical music. World. The girl who made Rachmaninoff weep. Victor's assistant, a young woman named Patricia, showed him her tablet with shaking hands. There on the screen was a photograph of Elena, younger but unmistakable, accepting a gold medal on one of the world's most prestigious stages. The headline read, "Elena Volkov, 18, becomes youngest pianist to master Rachmaninoff's Impossible Concerto." The article went on to describe her meteoric rise, her sold-out concerts, the recording contracts she had been offered. And then, at the bottom, a smaller article from 3 years ago. Piano prodigy disappears after family tragedy. Elena Volkov cancels world tour following parents' accident. Victor read quickly, his face growing paler with each word. Elena's father had died in a car accident. Her mother had survived but was paralyzed. Elena had walked away from contracts worth millions, from a career that would have placed her among the greatest pianists of all time, to care for her mother, and she had disappeared completely until now. As the music reached its climax, Elena's entire body was involved in the performance. She wasn't just playing the piano. She was conducting an invisible orchestra, painting with sound, telling a story that needed no words. The piece demanded everything from a pianist: technical skill, emotional depth, physical endurance, and spiritual connection. Elena gave it all. The final section approached, a part so notoriously difficult that some pianists had actually injured themselves attempting it. Elena's hands became a blur, but every note rang clear and true. The passion in her playing was almost overwhelming. Several people in the restaurant were openly crying now, moved by something they couldn't quite explain. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The last notes hung in the air like morning mist, beautiful and ephemeral. Elena's hands remained on the keys for a moment, trembling slightly. She was breathing hard as if she had just run a marathon. Slowly she opened her eyes and remembered where she was. The silence that followed was complete and absolute. For several seconds, no one moved, no one breathed. It was as if the entire restaurant was under a spell, and any sound might break. Then, from the corner table, the elderly music professor began to clap. Slowly at first, then faster. His wife joined him. Then the couple at the next table. Within seconds, the entire restaurant erupted in thunderous applause. People were standing, cheering, some still wiping tears from their eyes. But Elena wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Victor Ashford. He sat in his chair like a statue, his face a mixture of shock, shame, and something else, perhaps the realization of what he had just done. He had mocked one of the greatest pianists of her generation, a woman who had given up everything for love and duty. He had tried to humiliate someone whose talent far exceeded anything money could buy. Elena stood up slowly from the piano bench. Her legs were shaking slightly. Whether from emotion or the physical exertion of the performance, she wasn't sure. She walked back toward Victor's table, her head held high despite the tears still glistening on her cheeks. The applause continued, but Elena raised her hand gently and gradually it quieted. Everyone wanted to hear what she would say to the man who had tried to humiliate her. Victor started to reach for the $1,000 on the table, his hand trembling. That was... He couldn't find the words. For perhaps the first time. In his adult life, Victor Ashford was completely speechless. Elena looked at him for a long moment. The entire restaurant held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Would she take the money? Would she tell him off? Would she reveal why she was working as a waitress when she could have been performing in concert halls around the world? What happened next would surprise everyone, including Elena herself. Elena stood perfectly still, looking down at Victor's trembling hand reaching for the money. The $1,000 sat there on the table, looking somehow small and meaningless after what had just happened. She didn't move to take it, she didn't even look at it. "Keep your money, Mr. Ashford," she said quietly, but her voice carried through the silent restaurant with perfect clarity. Victor's hand froze. He looked up at her, and for the first time, really saw her. Not as a waitress, not as entertainment, but as a person. The tears on her cheeks had dried, but her eyes held something powerful, not anger exactly, but a kind of dignified strength that made him feel smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. "I don't play for money," Elena continued. "I never have. But I insulted you," Victor stammered. "I was cruel. At least let me... You want to pay me to make yourself feel better?" Elena's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "That's what people like you always do, isn't it? You think money fixes everything. You think it can buy you forgiveness, respect, even talent." The words hung in the air. Several people in the restaurant nodded quietly, having dealt with similar attitudes from wealthy customers themselves. Elena pulled out a chair and, surprising everyone, sat down at Victor's table. Not like a servant, but like an equal. The executives, with Victor, shifted uncomfortably, unsure what was happening. "You want to know why I'm here, serving you drinks instead of playing concert halls?" Elena asked. "You think I failed, don't you? That I wasn't good enough?" Victor couldn't speak. He just shook his head. 3 years ago, my parents were driving home from my concert at Carnegie Hall," Elena said, her voice steady but soft. "I had just signed a recording contract worth more money than I could have imagined. We were celebrating, they were so proud." She paused, and the restaurant seemed to hold its breath with her. A drunk driver hit them head-on. "My father died instantly. My mother..." Elena's voice caught slightly. "My mother survived, but she'll never walk again. She needs round-the-clock care, special equipment, medications that insurance barely covers." Patricia, Victor's assistant, had tears in her eyes. One of the executives looked away, unable to meet Elena's gaze. "I had contracts, tours planned, albums to record," Elena continued. "My agent said I could hire the best nurses, put my mother in the finest facility, visit her between concerts. That's what everyone expected me to do. Keep playing, keep earning, let strangers take care of the woman who gave up everything for my career." Elena shook her head slowly. "But every time I sat at a piano, all I could think about was my mother, alone in some facility. wondering why her daughter chose music over her. So I made a different choice. I walked away from all of it. But your talent, the elderly music professor spoke up from his table. Such a gift shouldn't be hidden. Elena turned to him with a sad smile. A gift? Maybe. But what good is a gift if you lose your soul using it? My mother taught me to play. She sat with me through every practice session, drove me to every lesson. Even when we could barely afford gas, she never missed a single recital, no matter how small. She turned back to Victor. You asked if I play. The truth is, I play every day. Not on grand stages or in concert halls, but in my mother's room at our tiny apartment. I play the old keyboard we bought from a pawn shop, with half the keys sticking and no pedals. But when I play, she smiles. Sometimes she even moves her fingers, along with the music, like she's conducting. Mr. Davidson, the manager, stepped forward. Elena, I had no idea. If you need time off, or if there's anything, I don't want pity, Elena said firmly. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because Mr. Ashford here needs to understand something. She stood up and looked directly at Victor. You have billions of dollars. You can buy anything you want. But you can't buy what I have. You can't buy the peace that comes from knowing you made the right choice. You can't buy the love I see in my mother's eyes when I come home exhausted after a double shift. And you certainly can't buy the ability to create something beautiful without needing to humiliate someone else first. Victor's face had gone through several transformations during her speech. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by something that looked almost like pain. The real irony, Elena said, now addressing the entire restaurant, is that he was right about one thing. I don't practice enough anymore. That performance wasn't my best. 3 years ago I could have played it better, but you know what? It doesn't matter, because I didn't play it for him or for any of you. She pulled something from her pocket, a small, worn photograph. She placed it on the table in front of Victor. It showed a younger Elena with her parents, all three beaming at the camera, Elena holding a trophy. That was the day I won the Tchaikovsky competition, she said. The happiest day of my father's life. He died thinking I would become the greatest pianist in the world, but he was wrong. I became something better. I became the daughter my mother needed. A woman at a nearby table was openly sobbing now. Others were wiping their eyes with napkins. Even some of the kitchen staff, still watching from the doorway, were visibly moved. Victor picked up the photograph with shaking hands. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at Elena. I'm sorry, he said, and for perhaps the first time in years he meant it. I'm so deeply sorry. I don't need your apology, Elena replied. But maybe you need to give it. Not to me, but to yourself. When was the last time you created something beautiful, Mr. Ashford? When was the last time you did something that wasn't about power or money or showing off? She picked up her notepad from the nearby table where she'd left it. Now I believe you ordered drinks. I'll go get those for you. Wait, Victor said suddenly. He stood up, and for a moment, everyone tensed, unsure what he would do. The drinks can wait, he said quietly. I think I need to hear more. Not about you, but about what you just said. About choices. About what really matters. Elena studied him for a moment. I'm working, Mr. Ashford. This is my job. Then I'll pay for your time. Not as an insult, but as a consulting fee. You just gave me the most valuable advice I've heard in years, and I don't even know if I understand it yet. The elderly professor stood up. Young lady, if you're giving life advice, I'd like to hear it too. That performance, it had something I haven't heard in years. Not just technical skill, but soul. Others began nodding, murmuring agreement. The entire dynamic of the restaurant had shifted. It was no longer about a billionaire and a waitress. It was about human beings, all struggling with their own choices, their own definitions of success. Mr. Davidson stepped forward. Elena, take the rest of the night off. With pay, this is more important than serving drinks. Elena looked around the restaurant, at all these faces turned toward her with something she hadn't expected. genuine interest, respect, and a hunger for something real in their successful but perhaps empty lives. "I'm not a philosopher," she said. "I'm just a woman who made a choice." "Sometimes," Victor said quietly. "That's exactly who we need to hear from." What followed would change not just Victor's life, but the lives of everyone in that restaurant. Elena looked around at all the expectant faces and slowly sat back down. The restaurant had transformed into something else entirely. Not a place of business, but almost like a gathering of people seeking something they couldn't quite name. "All right," she said softly. "But I'm not giving a speech. If we're going to talk, let's really talk." Victor pulled out the chair next to her and sat down, not across from her like a customer, but beside her like an equal. It was such a simple gesture, but everyone noticed it. "Can I ask you something?" Victor said, his voice different now, stripped of its earlier arrogance. "Do you ever regret it? Your choice?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "Every morning when my alarm goes off at 5 a.m. for the breakfast shift, there's a second where I think about what my life could have been. Concerts in Vienna, recording sessions in London, applause from thousands of people." She turned to look at him directly. "But then I go into my mother's room to help her get ready for the day, and she looks at me with such love, such gratitude, not for what I do, but just for being there. And I know I'm exactly where I need to be." A woman from another table spoke up. "My daughter wants to quit her job at a law firm to become a teacher. I've been telling her she's crazy, that she'll never make any money. But listening to you—" "Money," Elena said, shaking her head slightly. "We've built a whole world around it, haven't we? Don't get me wrong, I worry about money every day, every single day. But there's something I learned when I was training for competitions." The elderly professor leaned forward. "What's that?" "The pianists who won weren't always the ones with the most expensive teachers or the finest instruments," Elena explained. "They were the ones who played like they had something to lose, like the music mattered more than the medal." Victor was staring at his hands. "I haven't thought about anything mattering that much in I don't even know how long." Patricia, his assistant, suddenly spoke up, surprising everyone, including herself. "You used to, though. Remember? When you started your first company, you talked about changing the world, making technology that would help people." Victor looked at her, startled. "You remember that?" "I remember because it's why I wanted to work for you," Patricia said, her voice gaining strength. But somewhere along the way, it became about stock prices and market dominance and crushing competitors. The honesty in the room was becoming contagious. One of Victor's executives loosened his tie. "I haven't seen my kids awake in 3 weeks. I leave before they wake up, come home after they're asleep. My 6-year-old asked my wife if I still lived with them." Elena stood up and walked back to the piano. "You know what my mother told me the day before the accident? She said, 'Elena, you can play perfect notes, but if there's no love in them, they're just noise.'" She sat down at the piano again, but this time she played something different. A simple melody, almost like a lullaby. "This is what I play for her every night. It's not complex. Any first-year piano student could learn it. But when I play it, she closes her eyes and smiles. And for those few minutes, she's not in pain." The notes floated through the restaurant, soft and gentle. Several people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. "That's beautiful," Victor whispered. "What's it called?" "It doesn't have a name," Elena replied, still playing. "My mother used to hum it when I was little. I turned it into a piano piece. No one else knows it exists. It will never be recorded or performed on any stage, but it might be the most important music I've ever played." She stopped playing and turned back to face them. "Mr. Ashford, you asked if I regret my choice. Let me ask you something. What do you regret?" Victor was silent for a long moment. The entire restaurant waited. "Everything," he finally said, so quietly that people had to lean in to hear him. "I regret everything that led to me becoming the Kind of person who would humiliate someone for entertainment. He stood up suddenly and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. You know what's funny? I have 4 homes, 12 cars, a private jet, and the last time I felt genuinely happy was, I can't even remember. When I was building my first startup, he continued. I lived on ramen noodles and slept on a friend's couch, but I was excited to wake up every morning. Now I wake up to check stock prices and see who I need to defeat today. The elderly professor stood up. Young man, I taught music for 40 years. Do you know what the difference is between a technician and an artist? Victor turned to look at him. A technician plays the notes correctly. An artist plays them truthfully. This young lady, he gestured to Elena, just showed us the difference. The question is, what are you going to do with that lesson? Victor walked back to the table and picked up the photograph Elena had shown him earlier. Your father, he looks proud. He was, Elena said simply. My father was never proud of me, Victor said suddenly, surprising himself with the admission. No matter how much money I made, how many companies I built. He died last year and his last words to me were about a business deal. The restaurant had become a confessional, with successful people realizing what they had sacrificed for their success. Mr. Davidson, the manager, cleared his throat. I haven't played my guitar in 15 years. Too busy managing restaurants? Trying to climb the ladder. It's in my closet, gathering dust. Take it out, Elena said firmly. Tonight, go home and play it. Play it badly if you have to, but play it. A couple at a corner table stood up. The man spoke. We came here tonight to celebrate our anniversary. But we've spent the last hour arguing about money, about renovations, about everything except why we fell in love 20 years ago. His wife had tears in her eyes. We used to dance in our kitchen. When did we stop dancing? Elena smiled, the first real smile anyone had seen from her all evening. It's not too late. It's never too late to remember what matters. Victor pulled out his phone and did something unprecedented. He turned it off. Completely off. His executives gasped. Patricia, he said to his assistant, cancel my meetings tomorrow. All of them? She asked, shocked. All of them. I need to think, really think, for the first time in years. He turned to Elena. I came in here tonight thinking I owned the world. You've shown me I don't even own myself anymore. I've become a machine that makes money. That's all I am. Elena stood up and did something unexpected. She put her hand on Victor's shoulder. No, that's what you've become. It's not who you are. There's a difference. The simple human contact seemed to break something in Victor. His eyes filled with tears. He quickly tried to blink away. I want to help, he said suddenly. Your mother. The medical bills. Please. Not as charity. Not to make myself feel better, but because it's something good. Something that matters. Elena removed her hand. That's not your responsibility. No, Victor agreed. But maybe that's exactly why I should do it. What happened next would surprise everyone, including Elena, and change the course of multiple lives forever. Elena looked at Victor for a long moment, studying his face. She saw something there she hadn't expected. Genuine pain. Genuine desire to change. But she had learned to be careful with offers of help from wealthy people. I don't want your charity, Mr. Ashford, she said quietly. It's not charity, Victor replied. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my first attempt to do something that isn't a transaction, the elderly professor interrupted gently. If I may suggest something, young lady, you have a gift that the world needs to hear. Not in concert halls necessarily, but somewhere. And Mr. Ashford, you have resources but have lost your purpose. Perhaps there's a way to help each other. Elena frowned. What do you mean? The professor smiled. What if music could heal more than just your mother? What if there were other families dealing with trauma, with loss, with illness, who could benefit from what you do? Victor's eyes lit up, the first genuine excitement anyone had seen from him all evening. A foundation, not a charity, but something real. Music therapy programs in hospitals and rehabilitation centers. You could teach. Patricia added, getting excited too. Not just piano, but what you've learned about choosing what matters. Elena shook her head. You don't understand, I can't leave my mother. You wouldn't have to, Victor said quickly. What if we brought the students to you? Or set up a program where you could work part-time with full benefits enough to cover your mother's care. The room was buzzing with possibility now. Other diners were joining in, offering ideas, connections, support. It was as if Elena's honesty had broken down walls between strangers. But Elena held up her hand. Stop. Please, just stop. Everyone fell silent. This is exactly what I'm talking about, she said. You want to fix everything with grand gestures and big plans. But change doesn't happen that way. It happens in small moments, in daily choices. She walked back to the piano and sat down. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Tomorrow, most of you will wake up and check your phones first thing. You'll get caught up in emails and meetings and deals. Maybe you'll remember tonight for a few days, maybe even a week. But then life will take over and nothing will really change. That's cynical, Victor said. No, it's realistic, Elena replied. I've seen it before. People get inspired, make big promises, then slowly slide back into old patterns. So what do you suggest? Victor asked. Elena played a few soft notes while she spoke. Start small. Mr. Ashford, you want to help? Don't create a foundation. Go visit someone in the hospital. Play cards with them. Listen to their story. No cameras, no publicity, just you and another human being. She looked at the couple who had been arguing. You two, don't plan a grand romantic gesture. Just dance in your kitchen tonight, 5 minutes, that's all. To the executive who hadn't seen his kids awake. Leave work an hour early tomorrow, just 1 hour. Read your children a bedtime story. That seems so small, Victor said. Exactly. Elena smiled. Life is small moments. My father didn't love me because I won competitions. He loved me because I practiced even when I didn't want to. My mother doesn't need me to be famous. She needs me to be there when she wakes up scared in the night. The restaurant was quiet, absorbing her words. But, Elena continued, since you seem determined to help, there is something. Victor leaned forward eagerly. There's a community center, 3 blocks from here. They have an old piano that's probably worthless to someone like you. It's out of tune, missing some keys. Kids from the neighborhood come there after school. They've never had a music teacher. You want me to buy them a new piano? Victor asked. No, Elena said. I want you to help me fix the old one, with your hands, not your checkbook. This Saturday morning. It'll take hours, maybe all day. You'll get dirty, frustrated, and you probably won't be very good at it. Victor stared at her. You want me personally to fix a piano? I want you to understand what it means to create something with your own hands, to work for something that won't make you any money, or win you any recognition. I'll come too, Patricia said suddenly. I used to paint. Maybe the kids would like an art class. The elderly professor stood up. I'm retired, but I could teach music theory 1 day a week. Mr. Davidson raised his hand. I'll bring my guitar. Maybe start a little band. Others began volunteering. The woman whose daughter wanted to be a teacher offered to help with homework. The executive promised to teach basic computer skills. Elena looked around in amazement. You're all serious? You reminded us why we're here, the woman said. Not just in this restaurant, but here, alive in this moment. Victor stood up and extended his hand to Elena. Not to shake, just an open palm and offer. Saturday morning. What time? 7 a.m., Elena said, testing him. I'll be there. And he was. That Saturday, Victor Ashford, billionaire tech mogul, showed up at a rundown community center in jeans and an old t-shirt. He spent 8 hours fixing a piano, hammering keys, adjusting strings, getting his hands covered in dust and grease. Elena worked beside him, teaching him about each part, explaining how every component had to work together to create harmony. The first time they got a dead key to play again, Victor actually laughed, a real delighted laugh like a child's. I did that, he said. I fixed that. You did, Elena agreed. More people showed up than expected. Patricia brought art supplies. Mr. Davidson brought his guitar. The elderly professor brought sheet music. The executive brought his kids who had never seen their father work with his hands before. By the end of the day, the piano wasn't perfect, but it worked. And when Elena played it for the gathering crowd of neighborhood children, it sounded beautiful in its imperfection. The story could end here, but life doesn't end with single moments of triumph. 3 months later, the community center had become a hub of activity. Victor still ran his companies, but he spent every Saturday at the center, teaching kids about technology, but more importantly, learning their names, their stories, their dreams. Elena still worked at the restaurant 3 days a week, but now she also taught piano at the center. Her mother was receiving better care thanks to a new program Victor had quietly funded, not with fanfare, but anonymously, simply because it was right. The elderly professor started a youth orchestra with instruments donated by people who had been in the restaurant that night. The couple learned to dance again and taught ballroom classes on Sundays. The executive coached Little League, never missing a game. But the biggest change was in Victor himself. He was still wealthy, still successful, but he was no longer empty. He had learned what Elena knew all along, that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in connections, in purpose, in the simple act of showing up for others. 1 year later, the community center held its first concert. Elena played, but so did 15 children she had taught. They weren't perfect. Some notes were missed, some rhythms were off. But every note was played with joy, with purpose, with love. Victor sat in the front row, no phone in sight, tears streaming down his face. After the concert, a little girl who had learned to play piano tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. Victor," she said, "thank you for fixing our piano." He knelt down to her level. "Thank you for reminding me why music matters." Elena watched from the stage, her mother beside her in a wheelchair, finally able to attend one of her daughter's performances again. Her mother reached up and squeezed her hand. "You didn't give up music after all," her mother whispered. "You just found a better stage." Elena smiled, looking out at the room full of children, volunteers, and one transformed billionaire. "No, Mama. I found my purpose." The piano that had once sat dusty in a restaurant had started something beautiful. Not a movement, not a revolution, just people remembering what it meant to be human, one small act of kindness at a time. And every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. sharp, Victor Ashford was there, ready to help, ready to learn, ready to be more than just his bank account. He had learned the most valuable lesson of his life from a waitress who played the piano. True wealth is measured not in what you have, but in what you give, not in what you achieve, but in who you become, and not in the applause of thousands, but in the smile of one child learning to play their first song. The music continues to this day,